Good afternoon to all of our wonderful viewers out there in the virtual world, back with another rendition of the B&H Virtual Event Space. I am your host, Derek Fosmender, and we have a wonderful treat for you guys today. As you see, sitting right above me on my screen is the wonderful Tim Wolfer, who has been traveling the world for the last 10 years, telling stories, documenting different cultures, different stories, trials. He's going to get more into that because he's going to describe it better than I ever will. But today's topic du jour is tips and tricks for traveling with gear. This is always a hot button item when we talk about gear and when we talk about traveling. What do you bring? How do you bring it? What are the pitfalls that you run into? Tim's going to get into all of that. And not to be forgotten, hiding behind the scenes there, Janine Frest from Stella Pro Lights, who is our sponsor for today's event. So we thank you to Stella Pro Lights and Janine for joining us. And if you do have any gear intensive questions, whether it's something Tim talks about or something in general, feel free to drop that into the Q&A, or if you're joining us on Facebook or live stream, drop it into the comment section and Janine will answer that for you. But it's time for the man of the hour, Tim Wolfer. Take it away. Again, we're going to hold questions till the end, but if you guys do have any questions, feel free to drop them in throughout and we'll make sure we get those in the Q&A after Tim finishes up. So Tim, welcome to the event space.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. And thank you to Stella Pro for sponsoring this. To get right into it, my name is Timothy Wolfer, and I've been working as a documentary filmmaker for the last 10 years. I've traveled to over 40 countries now to film and put together a series of different projects. My latest project follows a group of transgender women as they cross Mexico in 2018 as part of that high-profile migrant caravan. And they're going to drop the link into the description for you. And one of the questions that comes up over the years is how do I travel with all of this film equipment? You know, we spend a lot of time putting our packages together, but traveling abroad with them can be quite challenging. And I've definitely made my mistakes over the years. So I'm excited to be here today and share those tips and tricks that I've learned with you. The first part of my presentation will be traveling with the gear, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about Stella Pro and how I've built a really awesome light kit for working overseas using their equipment. So the first thing is always planning, trying to decide what gear to take, how to insure your gear, what are the different customs, both cultural, like what is appropriate to film in different countries, and legalities of what can you take into a country, what are their local laws of bringing equipment in. And then if you were to break something, what could you live without? And the last part is, do you need a carnet? So, and we'll get into what a carnet here is in a second. So when I decide to go on a trip, for example, the caravan story, I had to decide which of my cameras to take. I have both an FS7 and an A7, or at that time, an A6500, as well as A6300. So I decided at that point I was going to take my A6500. Why? Because it's super light, it was portable. I knew I was going to be walking a lot. It was an independent project, so I didn't have a lot of budget for transportations or vans or fixers. So it was just going to be me in a backpack. So that's the setup I decided to go with for that trip. But on other projects I've done, I've taken up to 5, 6, 7 checked bags, and I'll take my FS7 and stuff. So that's a big thing. Another thing is insuring your equipment, because when you're overseas, one of the most stressful things is wondering if your equipment's going to walk off, and just knowing that you have an insurance plan to cover your equipment is a big deal. A lot of insurance that people use for gear won't cover them in a lot of countries, so I highly recommend people call their insurance companies or Google different companies. There's only a few of them out there that will insure film equipment for work abroad, so make sure you check about that before you go. Now, another question is, how do you take the equipment in and out of the United States? And one of the things that I've used, and for full disclaimer, I'm not a customs agent. I have these are just simply my experiences, but is something called a carnet. And so a carnet is oftentimes referred to as the passport for equipment. And basically, you list out all the equipment you're going to be taking, go to the airport extra early, have the customs officials check, the equipment, check your gear, and then when you get to the next country, you also show it to them wherever you may be going, and then they clear it into their country, and then you do it in reverse when you come back. It's quite a process, but it will save making sure your gear doesn't get confiscated when you're traveling. It's accepted by around 140 different countries, so check before you travel and decide, what the proper procedure will be. So when deciding what to travel with, I always make sure to take 2 of everything. I take 2 camera bodies, I take 2 sets of filters, I take 2 sets of microphones, and that can be different kinds of things like microphones, lenses. Like I'll have a 70 to 200 or a 24 to 105. But like the 24 to 105 is my favorite lens to shoot documentaries. It gives me a nice range of things. I can zoom in, get details. I can pull out wide and get a nice establishing shots. So oftentimes I'll travel now with 2 of that lens, and knowing that one of them might not get used, but just having that security of making sure that I've got 2 of those lenses. We talked about making lists of your gear. I have all that set up in a Google Docs. So like when I do need to, travel, I can just copy and paste out of my Google Docs, put it into the proper forms, and then be ready to rock and roll. One of the things is that I've done over the years is I will respond to things like hurricanes and stuff. And oftentimes in those situations, you have to go really fast. And so just having all this gear organized and planning ahead of time, getting set up to travel is like one of the biggest logistical things. When you're deciding what country to go to, it's oftentimes great to have a fixer on the ground. And a fixer is somebody who's going to help you with your logistics. They're going to help, maybe clear some of this equipment through customs and stuff like that. And oftentimes they can be an interpreter if the country is not of your native language, and a driver all mixed into one. And they usually aren't very expensive depending on where you're going. And it's just a wonderful thing to think about. And you can look online. There's lots of forums where you can find fixers to whatever countries you're going to. Another tip that I've found over the years is I like to take cash. Now, lots of countries, most countries now, you have ATMs, you can run your credit card in places, but for the off chance that your bank locks you out for whatever reason, or you have to cancel the credit card because of something fraudulent, it's always great to have cash on you. And I always go to the bank ahead of time and ask them for $100 bills that are brand new that aren't marked. You'd be shocked if you look at a piece of money how many different marks and tears and rips there are on it. So just the freshest, newest, crispest cash possible. And I always try and bring the cash back. I still use my credit card. I still use my debit card, but it's just that insurance policy of knowing that if something does happen, that you aren't going to be stuck. So when going to buy a plane ticket, one of the things that I see oftentimes is that don't always buy the cheapest plane ticket, because if you're going to be traveling with lots of gear, I've made the mistake over the years of the fact that the fees, the carry-on fees, the baggage fees will all add up. And so it's oftentimes good if you can find an airline that allows you to bring several checked bags. If you're doing this a lot, I know I built up status over the years with United, and just that basic level allowed me to get onto the plane early, and then would also allow me to have a couple free checked bags, which was always good because that's one less thing that I'm billing towards clients and stuff like that. Um, Another thing is that I will check a lot of equipment. I try and check my FS7 when I can. I try and check my lights and all my personal stuff, but I always bring enough stuff onto the plane that if something was to go wrong or if I was to lose a bag, uh, that I then would have enough equipment to at least get the job done. So if the FS7 is going under the plane, the A7R3 is going onto the plane with me. I'll give you an extreme example. A couple of years ago, I was working in South Sudan, and we were going to be working in a very remote spot and taking helicopters out there. And so they had told me to separate our cargo from our personal stuff or what we wanted to carry onto the helicopters with us. And so we decided to take as much camera gear as we possibly could onto our carry-on and send things like our tents and clothes and some of the other rations cargo. Well, needless to say, our bags didn't show up, including my sunscreen, and it was 11 days before they could get us another helicopter out there with all of our luggage. So this was an example of we had planned ahead. We had enough camera equipment. We didn't have everything, but we had enough that we still could get the project done. And thankfully we finished the project. And this isn't a story of how we failed. So that wouldn't have been good. Another thing that oftentimes you need to think about when traveling overseas with gear is lithium-ion batteries. So the US has their rules on flying with lithium-ion batteries, and you can look those up, but oftentimes different countries will have different rules. And it's not just about where you're going that you need to look into, but also where are you going to be transferring. And European standards are different than some of the Asian countries, which are different than the US standards. So really check on that and just plan ahead, because they will take your lithium ion batteries or potentially other equipment. For some reason, AA's too have gotten me into not trouble, but they've confiscated AA's, and I'm not exactly sure why, but just something to think about. So when checking equipment, I talked about these a little bit there earlier, but when checking equipment, I usually tend to like to use Pelican cases where I can, specifically if I'm going to be checking camera equipment or expensive audio equipment. Make sure that you have that documentation ready just in case somebody asks. They'll look through it, and it's just nice to know what you've got. If something gets lost, you've got that documentation with you. On location. So oftentimes flights will get in early in the morning or late at night. And, if you're working with a client, if you can say, hey, I'll give you a half day rate or something for the first day, if we can just not film, but, take a rest, get acclimated to the different time shifts, exchange money, make your contacts, make sure you've got your fixer in line or lined up, or just all of those logistical things that people have to deal with. I find that that's always helpful. Obviously, if you're covering something that's more breaking news or, when I've done disaster response work, you have to be ready to film the second you land, but it's always nice if you can have that prep time. One question I oftentimes get is, how do you keep yourself safe? And, we could do a whole presentation on this topic, but it's safety I have always found is very much a personal choice. So, decide what you're comfortable with, what you are and aren't going to do, and communicate that to the people you're working with, and just really think through that. Some people are okay with more risk, and some people are okay with less risk. But it's definitely a personal choice and something you want to think about before you ever take off, and again communicate that to your clients. Another thing that mistake I made when I first got started was I would film everything. I would film, on the streets, and I would go and film, walk all over the place and film this and that, and just be recording 24/7. and then totally miss the story. It would just be like, the story we could have filmed in 3 hours because it was right in front of me, but I totally missed it. And so I think that that's one thing, is to come up with a plan, decide what kinds of shots you're looking for, what you're planning on doing with this story, and really stick to that plan. Um, and then if other things happen, be flexible, be easy to work with, but figure that out. Um, Another issue that I find, or a question I get a lot when people ask filming overseas, is how do you work with interpreters? Um, so, so let's set up a scenario if we can here. You have a room full of people. You have your interviewee, maybe a producer, or your client that you're working with when you're working overseas, yourself, and maybe an audio person, 4 or 5 people plus the interpreter. Uh, this can be a lot to manage because you sit your interviewee down, and they're looking at the producer, and you're trying to figure out eye lines because they're having to talk through an interpreter. So what I've found works the best over the years is to put the interpreter next to the camera, and have the interviewee subject look at them, and then ask the questions to the interpreter, and have the interpreter doing the interview. It's not necessarily as natural as if the two people are speaking the same language, but it's the best tactic I've found in order to maintain that eye line, and really and get the interview so it looks natural, and flows quite easily. Another thing, that problem I see a lot, or I've run into, is flickering lights overseas, and this has to do with how their power runs. Our power here in the United States is 60 hertz, and theirs is 50 hertz, and so it can cause some rolling problems. And one trick I've found over the years is to just flip my shutter speed up to 100. For whatever reason, that seems to make it go away. But then, obviously, when you're done shooting inside, roll it back to double your frame rate. Make sure you predict how much storage you're going to need. There's nothing worse than not bringing enough storage, and always take a backup. I always have 2 duplicate drives, and if I'm traveling with another person, they get 1 drive and I get 1 drive as we're coming home, just in case something was to happen, or we were to get split up, or one of our bags was to get swiped. I just always want to make sure that we have backups of that footage, because ultimately, when you're doing work overseas, it's very expensive to get this footage. It's whatever day rate a client might be paying you, plus all of that logistics, which is can add up quick. So really think through that. So the camera gear I've been using most recently is, I have been traveling a lot with the Sony a7R III, and I really, really love this camera. I have it hooked up with an audio adapter, and my favorite microphone is the Sennheiser MKH416. And I shoot with this configuration. You can see there at the top of the image quite a bit. So, and it just works really well. I really like good audio. When I select a new camera, I always start with the audio and reverse engineer it to make sure that I can still use my microphone on it. And I think Sony was one of the first to come up with this XLR configuration so that I could do this. And then I also use the Tascam DR10 if I need a lavalier mic, and sync it in post. And then I want to talk a little bit about lighting. So LED lighting, I have been a late adopter over the years. Traveling overseas and stuff, I never wanted to take lights. I would oftentimes just take a reflector, find a window, and film, like that. And a couple of years ago, a friend of mine showed me the Stella Pro lights, and said, you really should check these out. They're an awesome light. And they work more like a Fresnel, because at that time I was still using my old RE 650s. So I got one of them and started playing with it. And I really, really liked the light. And so I decided to build my own travel light kit. And the kit, you can see here everything I've got in it. I've got 5 different light stands. I've got the 4 different Stella Pro lights. I have the Matthews Road Rags, a reflector, some mini grip arms, and then a boom pole holder. And down here you can see my boom pole. And I put the boom on one of the lights and then my Benro tripod. And so by doing this kind of a setup, I can do 4 light setup. I can do a overhead boom and my tripod, and all in a bag. Wait for it. That weighs between 48 and 51 pounds. Sometimes I have to remove 1 or 2 things, but it's so I can take one bag and I have everything I need in it. Throw the cameras in my backpack, and I'm right. Cameras, hard drives, laptop, that kind of stuff, and I'm ready to rock and roll. The Matthews Road Rags. So here's how I set all this up. I'll take the Matthews Road Rags and put them onto the light, or with the arm onto the light stand like this, and then have the Stella Pro up there. One really cool part is the Stella Pros have a remote you can use to adjust the light level and everything like that. And they're really ruggedly built. You can submerge them down to 100 feet. You can drop them from about 3 feet, so I've been told. And so I shoot them through the silk. And then one other thing that I do is, if I don't have sandbags, because I don't want to travel sandbags are heavy, is I'll take these things, these lens wraps, and I'll grab a water bottle, I'll grab some tools, whatever I've got, grab the lens wrap, and then just put it around the base of the stand. So you can see now I've got some weight to secure the stand. And so I have a ton of these lens wraps and I use them all the time. You can either take lens wraps just to do this, or you can just take them off your lenses. And so then you're killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Some examples of how I've set this up in the past. Here you've got your camera set up, and then your set of silks and shooting the lights through them. Another similar kind of setup that I've done. And I really like the control that this kind of a setup brings me over, say, a traditional light panel of some sort. And you can see there's kind of the quality of light. In this day and age, I rarely use 3-point lighting, because cameras have so much depth now that I find that you really don't need a hair light. You can just bounce it off the ceiling or whatever. And so I just use 2 of these and really big soft light sources, and it works really great for interview setups. This is obviously in a very dark room, and the camera is maybe at ISO 400 and the lights are just dimmed down, so it'll last all day. Another setup here where we've got the camera with windows behind it, and so I've got the lights cranked all the way up, and they're doing a beautiful job just balancing the subject off the windows. They're blown out, but it's not in a distracting way, in my opinion. This next setup is one of the ones I'm most proud of. This was in Nigeria, and one of the things I'm always looking for when doing filmmaking is good audio. So let's find a quiet place to do an interview and set up there, and then we'll figure out the lighting and the logistics from there. But again, starting with the audio. So this hospital was extremely busy and very noisy. So this room up in the top corner, top level, was the only place we could find to set up. And as you can see, it was tight. There was a gurney here. You can see on the bottom left edge, there's a gurney there. And then you have this bathroom back here. And so we proceeded to set up in here. And I'm going to flip forward real quick so you can see what the shot will look like. So that was the shot we were able to create. But the way we did this is through one of the small Stella Pros, reflected it off of something that was already there, a fridge. Um, and then we had the microphone down here on a stand. And I put the camera straddling a toilet back here, and then put one of my silks up and then another silk to try and take some of the light off the background. So to cut it down by a stop. And the producer, sat on a bucket, and we had the camera set up here, and we put, he was talking about maternal health. And so we put the baby scale in the background, and I shot it with a 50 millimeter at 1.2, which I don't recommend. Usually I tell people I don't like to go below 1.8 or even 2.0 for interviews, just because I want both eyes to be in focus. But as you can see here, I just rode the focus and chose the eye closest to me, and that was the setup. And I think that the versatility and just having such a compact kit really worked well. Another shoot in Bangladesh. This was a spot where we were having to do a lot of walking to get our stories, and they were all outside. So what we did is we took one of these little light stands and the light and just chucked it into my backpack, and took the camera over my shoulder and the tripod also in the backpack, and we could walk and then do our setup and do an interview. And these lights, they're daylight temperature, so that we were able to really get almost like an HMI, but just get enough fill to make some really nice separation. Another thing is that the lights do get a bit warm. Even though they are LED, they get just a touch warm sometimes. But since they are waterproof, oftentimes if I see a water source, you can just throw them under a faucet or under a water source and just cool the light down, put it back in your backpack or bag. Probably want to dry it off first. Another example, I was sent to the British Virgin Islands to cover Hurricane Irma. And while I was there, Hurricane Maria hit. And so I hooked the Stella Pro up, as you can see there, to a railing. And they have a really cool remote. And I was able to use them to turn it on and off and get some shots during the night, which was very nice to just have that convenience and know that they're rugged enough to handle something like that. This is the shoot in South Sudan where our bags got lost, and it's probably 115 degrees or so outside. And this is our setup. And the day that the bags actually did get there, and I had a tripod again and audio gear, but we just set the Stella Pro up as kind of a fill key light there, and did the interviews, and worked really well. So Stella Pro just came out with the CLX10, and they sent me one to give it a try. And so I just wanted to walk through. I shot a little test video earlier this week with it. So I just kind of wanted to show a little video of that. And so with their one of their kits, it comes in this nifty bag, and with all of these different kinds of modifiers. There you've got the light. And so we decided to take the light sailing. And as you all know, on the East Coast, we had a big snowstorm on Sunday. The day we decided to take it sailing, and that's the boat we decided to take. So there's my friend Sam, who agreed to help out with this, and we rigged up the boat. There it is. And she's telling how cold it is and how, we don't want to fall in the water. And there I am rigging the light to the boom of the boat, and just using one of the Matthews clamps, I was able to rig it on real easy. Like, I had the remote in my pocket, but since the boat was so small, I just reached over and would turn it on and off, and was able to just kind of use it as a fill to bring her off the background. Obviously, the background was extremely bright that day. So there she is, and you can see here, I'm going to turn it on and off, and you can see just kind of what I'm doing with it, getting some light into her eyes, and tuning it in. I didn't want her, it didn't want it to look unnatural. So just turning the brightness down, just kind of finding that sweet spot right in there and just kind of left it. And we got some beautiful shots. It's awesome to know that it was weatherproof and I don't have to worry about it. I also think the cameras do a really good job in the weather now. I wasn't worried about that either. So we sailed along for a while and just got some really neat shots. There it is, rigged up with the barn doors. Uh, so it was very cold, and yeah. Anyways, there's another shot of the end of the shoot with the light and the camera there. And with that, I'll take some questions if anyone has any.
We have nothing at this point, Tim. We're all sucked into it.
Okay, sorry about that.
No, no, that means you're covering everything. I'm over here taking notes. I got a lot of information that we haven't had, and we've discussed travel and gear a lot, but there's a lot of information. Like I never in my life had heard of a carnet. So a lot of good information coming out. So that's what it is. You're hitting all the points.
Awesome. Yeah, the carnet, again, it's only accepted by certain countries, but it is important, and a lot of people will ask, how do you make sure your gear doesn't get confiscated? It's by doing your homework and just making sure that you do have all of that, your ducks in a row there.
Definitely. I haven't done too much traveling, so for me, a lot of this is, probably information I'll never have to use because I never get out of New York. But what's the main thing that you get asked when you do these or when people talk to you about traveling? I mean, I gotta figure most people aren't going to the locales that you're going with the amount of gear that you're going. I mean, a lot of people, it's probably hobbyists, amateurs, especially our audience, are people that are going with a backpack, maybe a backpack full of gear. Um, what do you think is the most relevant piece of information for those people who might not be doing it professionally or at the extent that you're doing it?
I think a lot of people do ask about safety and how they make sure they don't get their gear taken. And my thing very much always is it could get taken. And so I think just making sure it's insured and taken care of so that you don't have to worry about that. And also, take lots of SD cards, constantly be switching your cards out and moving them to a safe spot. So if the camera does walk off, you don't lose your entire day's shoot. I think that that's the basics of it. You're the one that needs to come home safe. Don't worry about the equipment.
Definitely. I mean, I guess that's human nature. We always focus on the wrong things. We
Yeah.
focus on it's like, oh, my $5,000 camera or my $10,000 in gear. And like you said, the safety thing is probably the biggest aspect that people don't consider. What's the most forgotten thing in travel? Is there one thing that whether it's a piece of gear or a piece of information or advice that is the one thing that you always have to make sure you have checked off before you travel?
I think sometimes I forget filters. They're just a small thing that at the end of, that I just keep them now stored in the camera bag because there's nothing worse than forgetting filters. Um, I think that that's a big thing. Lots of little detailed cables. You won't have the right USB cable to charge the remote that goes, with the lights and all that kind of stuff. And so, uh, oftentimes those kinds of details get overlooked. And I think that that's why having everything organized in spreadsheets, you can just go down through and the day before, the night before, just check off. Um, I think one thing that I'm always struggling with is deciding which bags to take. I have I have more camera bags than I have cameras to carry them. And so some trips I'll decide on a small bag and some trips I want a big bag and I usually never choose right. So I'm always limping along, with this stuff in the wrong bag. And with the nice thing with this light kit I built is that it always stays packed and I just don't fuss with it. It's always that way. And if I had to do a shoot today, I know it's ready.
Now we had a lot of questions on the carnets. I guess I wasn't the only one that was
Okay.
curious about them. So we have Katrine asking if carnets are needed for smaller amounts of gear as well. And Teresa is asking if the carnet is specifically a United States thing, or if it's a. I know you said certain countries don't require it. Is it something that's a globally known thing?
So again, I'm not an expert on this. This is only from my experience, but from the reading I've done, it was part of a treaty or a pact or something like this that all these countries came together and came up with this concept of a passport for your equipment. And it doesn't just apply to film equipment. It's for, very expensive materials. So yeah, it could be tools, it could be maybe high-end jewelry, it just expensive things that people are traveling abroad for. And basically, it's saying that I'm going to take this piece of, I'm going to take, let's take my FS7. I'm taking it out of the United States, and that I intend on bringing it back into the United States. And so therefore, I don't need to pay taxes and duty on the export import for the countries. And so the US is, you're acknowledging that that's what you're going to be doing. They usually require a 20% deposit on the equipment, but the ones that I've always used, you can pay a fee and then they cover that deposit. And so, is it needed? You can read on the dollar amounts that they suggest that you do it for. A backpack full of equipment. People do that all the time, back and forth to on their vacations and stuff. So I would just read, determine on how much gear you're taking and decide when you probably would be appropriate to fill one of those out.
Okay. Now we had a question from Steve on live stream asking what you recommend for keeping your gear safe in public areas. So about even like transport. I know everybody, it seems like every professional photographer or filmmaker has a story of a van being broken into or a rental car being broken into and gear stolen. What do you recommend?
Yeah, I've never come up with a good solution to this one. I think that that's part of the reason getting a good fixer, because like oftentimes, the fixer doesn't need to be there on the shoot, or hiring a driver, somebody that gets to stay with the car, stay with the gear, is important. If it's super dangerous, just don't take a lot of gear. I think that one thing that we all do sometimes is we take way too much equipment, and that actually bogs us down and keeps us from getting those moments that actually makes for a good story, a good video, a good movie. So just strip down, what do you actually need, and then take two of that.
Okay. And we have a question from one of our viewers joining us here on Zoom who is traveling, plans to travel to Japan once everything is safe again, doesn't speak the language, doesn't have the budget for an interpreter. So they're asking, how do you go about when you're going to some of these places where there is a language barrier and you want to be respectful of cultural bounds, where you're not just shoving a camera in somebody's face? For the people who don't necessarily have a fixer or don't have things set up on the back end to go and do a project that's already been put in place, how do you recommend navigating a new country and new cultures?
So the first thing, like, the first couple of days, just get to know the cultures, make some friends, and just simply ask, what is appropriate, what isn't appropriate. Do your research ahead of time. Look online. A lot of these questions are on forums that you can answer. As for not having a translator or interpreter, I do have a clever trick for that. So Google Translate on your phone works extremely well. And so what I do is I'll set up the camera next to me with the tripod, and get my shot set and step aside like a reporter or producer would do, and then I type in my question into my phone, and I just hand it to them and have them read it, and then point at my eyes and say, look at me, and have them talk, and listen, because as we talk, it's always better if you have someone there listening, even if you don't understand what they're saying, and just have that conversation back and forth through Google Translate. And it works extremely well. I think people will actually be surprised with the results you can get doing interviews that way.
Definitely. Now, did you start as a photographer or a filmmaker? And if you started
I
as a photographer, Yeah, go ahead.
No, I started as a filmmaker. I started working for a PBS station in South Bend, Indiana, you know, late in high school, early in college. And so I started with, well, I was just on the back end of beta cams and DV tapes going out. So that's photography is something that I'm constantly trying to improve on because it isn't my nature. And they are quite different, actually. I think a lot of people think they're similar, but again, I'm always reverse engineering my shots and everything for the audio. And with photography, you don't have that concern as much. And so you can do different kinds of framing. You have a lot more resolution, so you can put a lot more details into your shots, and people can focus in on those. Whereas video, you're constantly just trying to get the details and just get good audio.
Yeah, and it's funny. It seems like it's always the other way around. People start in still photography because it is. It's easier. There's less to worry about. So capturing one frame versus capturing, thousands of frames and having to have everything all match up and be lit perfectly. So for somebody who is looking to get into video in this day and age, I mean, have things changed since when you got in? What's the best break into video? Do you recommend still going, is the intern round even still an option for that, or should people just start kind of learning on their own and getting out there and creating video themselves?
I don't know if I necessarily know the best route in this day and age. I think that if I was to be starting out again, the best opportunities have always been the ones that you just make for yourself. When I was in college, I jumped on a plane after the Haiti earthquake about 4 days afterwards and hitchhiked in and made my first film. And opportunities begot opportunities, and so that led to me being able to do more travel and stuff. And so just constantly, if you have some time on your hands, live frugally and then be able to use that money to go do what you ultimately want to be doing. I think that that's, probably the best route. And I think how have things changed? I think it's an exciting time to be going into video. I mean, you have all of these YouTube stars now that are just making some awesome content about things that would have never gotten greenlit by a TV station or something like that 10, 15 years ago. Rightfully so, those TV stations are serving a wide swath of people. But now, uh, sailing is something I've gotten recently interested in. And there's all of these YouTube stars making money off of just making sailing videos. And it's such a niche area, but more power to them. So I think it's an awesome time. I oftentimes equate it to writers. It used to be if you wanted to be a writer, you had to have access to the typewriter or to the printing press, which was a very expensive elite thing. But now, anybody can become a writer, and so I think that it's equally as exciting for video and filmmaking.
Definitely. I think you hit the nail on the head there. A lot of projects that would never see a green light. And I think that's the greatest thing about the ability now. And I mean, you see a lot of YouTubers, they take a little mirrorless camera, a point and shoot. Now they even have the point and shoots that are geared towards influencers and just holding it up like this. I mean, you see it on the convention floor all the time. People
Yeah.
walking around just taking videos like this and learning how to edit online through other YouTube tutorials, and there you go. You got your own content. So it's an interesting and exciting time to be a creator because really it's just an open field for everybody. Now, moving into gear wise, we had some questions on crew. What kind of crew are you traveling with? Um, are you putting at the forefront the gear you need, or is it more about, hey, if I'm traveling with a light crew and I'm going to an area that has a lot of restrictions, I'm only taking what I need? Where's your emphasis there?
Um, I think that each project, a lot of times it's based off budgets, right? The bigger the budget, the more crew we can have, and usually the better the result will turn out. I've done it both ways, where I'll take crew from the United States overseas with me, or I've done it where I'll hire locally, and they both have pros and cons. The pros of hiring here is that I know the people usually ahead of time, and so we already have that rapport. We don't have to build it in the field. But one of the pros of hiring locally is that they know their way around wherever you're at. And so it's just that extra bit of help and cultural sensitivity that they can add to the value of the production. And you're also supporting a local crew. So it goes both ways, but a lot of times too, I'll just go by myself. If I'm going to go by myself, I definitely try now to just use a DSLR. I used to try and take my FS7 or even my HDX 900 way back in the day. But yeah, I think that the gear is definitely based on that. I think the other thing is what type of project is it? If it's, like the caravan when I was going across Mexico, uh, we took, or I just took a camera because I also had to carry my laptop and hard drives and clothes and stuff. And initially at that trip, I took way too much equipment. And I had my drone with me and I had all this other stuff. And I ended up ditching it all in Mexico City and just took the bare minimum of what I needed. So, that's kind of how you decide on the gear.
Now, we had a question actually. You mentioned the drone. We had a question about if it's different traveling with the drone, or is there anything that makes a difference with the drone versus other gear?
This question I knew we were going to get, but it's one that's changing day by day by day. It's so like I could give you an answer today and it could be different tomorrow. When I first got the drone, you could pretty much take it anywhere. Now countries are looking for them, and they have their own laws. The U.S. has its laws. So the drone is just something to just do your homework. And I really encourage people to think about safety, safety, safety with the drone. Make sure you know how to fly it if you're going to be flying it over people's heads. I don't like flying drones over people's heads. I try and stay, outside or in some kind of perimeters or whatever, just because, this is an object up in the air that's uh, somewhat heavy. So just really think through the ethics of that.
Hmm. Do you find that it's generally as restrictive or more restrictive or less restrictive overseas than it is in the United States with the drones?
I've only done it a few times because a lot of countries aren't allowing it.
Okay.
So, yeah, I guess that's actually the answer right there.
Hey, I live in New York, so it's like it's not even worth it for me. I can't use it in, I think there's like a handful of spots in the five boroughs that you can use a drone here,
Yeah.
and it's not any place that I would want to use a drone. So it's kind of it's been good though. It saved me some money as far as not having to go spend on that. Robert is asking an interesting question here. Are you using any solar devices to charge your batteries? How are you powering when you're out there traveling? What's the most efficient way to power all your gear?
Great question, Robert. So, yeah, I carry a lot of batteries. So uh, for the A7R3, I have 5 batteries, which I estimate will last me about 2 days of shooting. For the A7R, or sorry, for the A6500, I have 10 batteries because those things were terrible on power, and that I still think will last me about 2 days. For the FS7, I have the big Anton Bauer batteries, a couple different brands, but the gold mount ones, and I have 5 of those. And if that shoot we did in South Sudan, we shot for 10 or 12 days just using those and just being super conservative. And then we also I take the Gold Zero Solar if I need, but that will charge maybe a battery halfway up for an entire day of charging. The solar, it's getting there, but I don't trust it yet.
It's still a little ways
Another
off.
time we were sent, yeah, another time we took a generator. It just depends.
Mhm. Now, backpack wise, Craig is asking what backpack size is reliably accepted as check on for check on baggage, and is there a size that you recommend for any reason?
Um, so most of the photo backpacks that I've seen will are acceptable for carry on. There are a few that probably will go overboard, but think about it like just try and spatially think about the room in front of your seat and will that backpack actually go under there when selecting your backpack. So I'm looking, we all know how small that space is, and so yes, they might technically allow you onto it, but But when you're the last person on the plane and you're having to jam it under the seat in front of you, and they're saying you can either try and force it under, or we're going to take it, and so this plane can take off. Just kind of be thinking through that. That's how I'd select the size. As for photo backpacks, I've tried lots of them over the years. Most recently, what I typically do is I just take a normal backpack, something that's low profile, that I bought at any store. And then I take those lens wraps, which are really awesome. And I just wrap up my lenses and my cameras and all my gear and just chuck it all in the backpack. And I just find that that's more convenient for me.
We had a similar conversation yesterday, and I want to get your opinion on it, 'cause it's always great to get different experiences from different creatives regarding, especially stuff like this, where it's regarding, what your normal routine is. And it's asking about what stays on you at all times when you have to check stuff in if you're flying, when you have to be separated from your gear. Is there certain stuff that's always on your person? Is it your SD card holders? There was questions about, and we can kind of even spin this into, because everybody always asks about how you back up on the road. Are you backing up on the road? Are you offloading to anything and reusing cards? Are you only using cards once and then storing them? Are they staying with you at all times? Can you talk a little bit about your workflow for storage?
Yeah, so storage, I do take, I do offload every single night onto, I usually use the Lacy rugged drives and just offload onto them. And then I always have two. I always have like this one is labeled an A, and then I have a B drive, and the footage gets duplicated. And then during the day when I'm shooting, one drive is on me and one is back at the hotel. So that if the hotel is to get broken into, I would still have a copy of my data. If, my day bag, you always have your accessories, your lights, your whatever on you was to get stolen, I've still got a copy of the data back at the hotel room. So I always do that. And yeah, I offload every night and just make sure I have plenty of space. I'm still using spinning drives just because for the sheer volume of data, especially with the FS7, I just can't afford to run solid states, but that's probably the next move as the price continues to come down on those.
Yes, the price does. It's one of those things. Once you move to a solid state drive and you get the speed and just knowing that there's no moving parts and there are no spinning parts. I've lost 5 terabytes worth of data from old school
Oof.
hard drives. So
Ooh, I'm
yes,
so
it's not
sorry.
fun. It was years ago. I've
There.
forgotten about it now, but every once in a while I'm like, I wonder, I know there's stuff on there that I didn't even realize I had on there, but if I don't remember it, I don't miss it. Question is a two-part question from two of our viewers. Elizabeth is asking if most of your work trips are related, and Adrian asks if you get work visas for any of the countries you go to.
Oh, great questions. Yeah, so uh, my work trips are usually related. My clients are all of one. I work a lot in the humanitarian and development sectors, and so it's a small industry, and so you get to know a lot of the people and the clients and stuff like that. Um, and as for work visas, yeah, I mean, each country has their different rules, and so you have to find out what it is and secure the proper visas. I live in Baltimore, and so I use an agency down in Washington D.C., and they secure all the visas for me, or sometimes the clients will do it. But yeah, that's a big task when you're planning an international trip, especially if you're going to be doing it professionally.
Definitely. And Steve is asking about insuring gear for someone who's a semi-amateur. Um, Obviously, separating it from a professional, is there any difference for somebody who might just be a hobbyist or an amateur, or somebody who's just happens to travel a lot and likes to take photos or videos in their traveling? Is there a route? I know you talked about, the whole insurance thing where there's so many different options and it's hard to really point anyone in one direction, but is there a good place for somebody to start who is not a professional but still wants to insure their gear for travel?
Yeah, a lot of the insurance that I found, you just have to disclose to them which you're doing, and so just call them. Just Google camera equipment insurance, and then I always call and just get someone on the phone to walk me through it. versus just reading it and just say, hey, here's what I'm doing. I'm going to Europe, I'm going to Kenya, whatever it may be, and say, will it be covered in this kind of a location? Because oftentimes they'll have different requirements and restrictions and how much they will and won't cover, and whether they'll cover it if it's stolen out of a car, or if they won't cover it if it's stolen out of a car. So the best thing to do is just call and explain what you're doing. It's not something that you want to get wrong, for sure.
Yeah, you don't want to find out that you're not covered as you're trying to put a claim in on your $10,000 worth of camera gear. It's
Oh, yeah.
not the best time to find that out. So no, I agree with that. I think this is one time you don't want to go to the Facebook groups. The Facebook photography groups, they're going to tell you everybody wants to be right, everybody wants to get their input. Just talk to an underwriter and find out the extenuating circumstances, what's going to disqualify it from a claim. And because like you said, there's a lot of extenuating circumstances. A lot of people cover their gear under like a renter's or homeowner's policy, and then they'll find that it might not be covered if they travel, and it's not the same thing. So it's covered if somebody breaks into the home or the apartment and steals it, but it's not covered if you take it overseas and it's stolen. So definitely great advice there, Tim. Gear question, bringing it back to the Sony. Rob is asking why the A7R III and not the A7S III. How often do you upgrade your gear? Are you really putting it through the ringer out there on the road?
Well, yeah. So it's ironic that we're having this conversation during a pandemic. Work has been slow, and I haven't been on the road, obviously, for the last year. So I don't see a need to upgrade. I upgrade when I need to. I was shooting with an HDX 900. If anybody knows what that is, you can Google it. It was a tape-based camera that I had mounted an Atmos solid-state drive to the back of, and I used that up through 2016, I want to say. So like
Wow.
way beyond its
Wow.
shelf life, because it still looked good. And I think that that's a big thing, is I just shoot with it as long as I possibly can to get the most out of it, to make that, I'd rather the money be in my bank account than in something that's depreciating. So that's my philosophy, is I just upgrade it when I need to. And I'm not afraid to also, I keep as little equipment as I can, obviously two of everything, but as little equipment as I can. And if I do need something, say I needed an iDirect, if anyone knows what that is, it's like a teleprompter style device a couple of years ago, and I overnighted it, to get it for the shoot. And that's kind of my philosophy. If I need it, I buy it, but if I don't, I get rid of it.
The old financial advisor in me is loudly applauding that advice right now. I think that's so great. I actually just got asked the question earlier this morning about gear. What's a really good camera? And everything is good now. Everything, anything in the last 20 years gives you more than enough than you need. It's all about what's up here. If you can't make do with your gear, then
I think of a lot of what motivates me to upgrade to new equipment is the ergonomics of it. And I think that the camera, when the DSLRs first came out, yes, they were shooting video, but it was very cumbersome. The audio couldn't go into the camera, so you were trying to rig up H4Ns into the thing. And so that's why I stuck with the HDX 900 for so long. And then as the FS7 came out, and it felt like a proper ENG camera coming from the video television industry. I really liked the way it felt on my shoulder and the audio, and it was a lot of bang for your buck. So I got that. And then, now that they came out with all these cool audio adapters, obviously I've bought into Sony, so I'm sticking with it. But it was just nice to be able to do all of that now into the camera versus rigging it.
definitely. I mean, and there's certain limitations that you do hit that it makes it easier to get the job done. Like when we're talking about lighting, do you have a light that can overpower the sun? If you're going to be working outside and
Yeah.
filming interviews outside, you need a light that can overpower the sun. That's gonna, is it necessary 100%? No, but it makes the job a heck of a lot easier.
Yeah.
So gear, what can you say? Gear, you love it, you hate it sometimes, it's necessary, but ultimately, as long as you have something, if you have some tool, all you need is a rock. You don't need a hammer from Home Depot. If you got a rock, it's gonna do the same job if you know how to use it. So
Also the other one that a lot of people do is they shoot an S log or these log profiles. And I did that when I first got the FS7. And depending on the clients, some of them want you to shoot in log, but if I have my preference now, I just try and burn everything in. I try, and that's part of the skill. That's part of the art, is learning how to use that equipment so you nail that exposure every single time, in the focus and all of this stuff. I mean, that's where you're investing in yourself and your talent versus saying, well, I can fix it in post with the log, which can be tricky in themselves to shoot with. So I just like to burn the images right in if I possibly can. This image that's up on the screen now, I added a little bit of contrast and a little bit of tone and sharpness, but other than that, it's pretty much how I shot it out of the camera.
That's interesting. I didn't even think to ask you about that, but now that you bring it up,
Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting to see. It's one of those things where it's like with still photography. Everyone tells you from the day you start to shoot everything in RAW, never shoot JPEG. And what does that kind of teach you to do is it teaches you to be a little looser with nailing everything in camera, because you can go correct. And I kind of feel like log is sometimes treated the same way, where you don't focus on the precision and the craft and the skill, like you said, of getting it all right in camera.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm the same as you, and it's mostly because I don't know how to edit video. So log is just another step for me to learn and perfect. But yes, it is video. Video it's a beast. It's a different beast. But Tim, huge thank you for you. Actually, I'm gonna sneak one more question in here, because being that we're talking about traveling, Craig just got a question, and this is a great question. Overseas, different outlets, anything for adapters or power stuff that you recommend? I know there's so many products on the market now, and you don't want to go over there with something that you just scored cheap on Amazon and it doesn't work and you're in another country. Is there anything you recommend?
I do use the cheap adapters, and I just take a bunch of them, 4 or 5 of them, and just hopefully they work. But the one thing I do suggest is check the bottom of your equipment. Make sure it's compatible for 240 volts. 99% of it nowadays is, but there is an occasion that I've blown up a piece of equipment just because it was designed for 110 and I plugged it into a 220 circuit. So really check your gear.
Check your gear. Listen to the guy that's been to over 40 countries and not the guy that never leaves the Bronx. Trust me, he knows more than I do. But Tim, it's been a wonderful hour of information. Thank you for answering all of our questions. For everybody watching, as thorough as you were, see, you could be super, super, super thorough, and there's always going to be questions. But thank you to everybody who tuned in. Janine, we kept you just hanging out back there behind the scenes today. We didn't bother you. We let you just enjoy the show. So huge thank you to Janine for being there, and for Stella Pro Lights for sponsoring this wonderful event. Tim, thank you so much again for all your information. This has been another rendition of the B&H Virtual Event Space. We'll catch you all next time.
Thank you.